Moving is hard. Teaching is hard. So imagine doing this multiple times throughout the span of only a few years. My name is Dylan, and today we'll be interviewing Mr. City, a new teacher here at Monomoy, and learning about previous schools he's taught at, his different interests, and what life looks like outside of school. Mr. City?
How are we doing today?
I'm so glad you let me interview you today. I'm very excited for this.
Yeah, no problem. This is going to be good.
Yeah.
Lots of things to tell you, probably.
Got it. You're someone who has moved many different places over your career for teaching. Why is this, and why now do you specifically choose Cape Cod?
So yeah, my first teaching job was right outside the city of Philadelphia. Just kind of happened that way, where I was just looking for jobs across the country, and thankfully a job opened up there. It was a phenomenal school. I spent 8 years there. It was right on the edge of the city and the suburbs, and I coached track there and really had a great time. I lived in Philadelphia. We had our first daughter, and then we found out we were going to have twins. We needed a little bit of extra help, so that's what brought us up to my next job, which was in the Lehigh Valley. We moved to a more rural town there called Nazareth. We lived with my mother-in-law for a year. We, had all the struggles of starting off a family with twins and trying to, handle all that craziness. And so I did that for 5 years before the opportunity to move to Cape Cod finally came up. And my wife and I talked about, this is sort of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to live somewhere beautiful, to move to somewhere where everybody, dreams of retiring someday, but to do it while we were young and had kids. And so, our kids were young enough to move schools and transition, and we were sort of, crazy enough to just sort of leave everything behind and go off. We didn't have any family here or anything, and just sort of start life, kind of over again, and just, live, I guess, life to the fullest and have that great experience of being here.
Being a new teacher here this year, what were your expectations, and has anything led up to these expectations that you have?
Monomoy always seemed like a school that offered its students an opportunity to be kind of worldly, and my wife and I really valued that idea of having the opportunity for our kids to experience different cultures, travel to different places, and that's not something you always see offered in high school. So we really like that, as something for our kids, so that maybe they would be a little bit more open-minded to the world. I think both of us valued that, and I've seen kids go on these trips and come back, really having seen things that they otherwise wouldn't, I think, in some places. So it's really, it's met all my expectations so far.
What is your fondest memory you've had over all your years of teaching at different schools?
So, geez, I don't know if there's maybe one memory, but I think any time where you've had to work with a student who's had a struggle or something about life wasn't always perfect for them, and you've found that out about them, they've felt confident enough to trust you and share that with you, and you've tried to help them move past it or to deal with it and to succeed, to go on to college, to start a family, to go on forward and do all those kind of things that I think you hope that everybody is able to do. And so I think there's been a few times in my teaching career where I've run into a student here or a student there who's needed that extra assistance, and just being able to be there for that person, help them, see them grow, change, and move past some of those things that were maybe hard and otherwise would have pulled them down. I think that those have always been the most redeeming moments for me.
Knowing you're big into music, what did the early days of music affect your upbringing?
So music has always sort of been there through my sort of formative years of development. I can trace it back to when my dad gave me a Sony cassette player, and I would sort of hide it under the covers and listen to the Kiss 10 at 10 at night every day, before bed. And then, that transformed into, listening to other music on the radio, really sort of becoming, part of, I guess, or growing up during the grunge movement and having that be pretty influential on my musical taste. But then just that ability to just scan the radio and find new stations. Growing up in Buffalo, sometimes I would get stations from Canada, and so I listened to a lot of, stations from Toronto, and, I was exposed to music that maybe I wouldn't have heard just living and growing up in the United States. And so that shaped my music into maybe a little bit more worldly than it would have been. And then, of course, with the advent of the internet, downloading music, the sort of the freedom to find any kind of music that you wanted and be exposed to all sorts of different genres and artists and things, I think really opened up my eyes to there's not just one type of music that I like or one type of artist that, and still to this day I can listen to any genre, any time period and just, appreciate good music and just the musicality of it, maybe the lyrics, maybe what the artist stands for, and just sort of, be interested in that and passionate about that sort of ever-changing and expansive, landscape.
As a new teacher here at Monomoy, you seem to be more open to AI more than others. Why is this?
I've always grown up with technology. I was on the internet from a young age, maybe from like 3rd or 4th grade. And so it's something that's always been a part of my life, this ever-changing sort of, technological landscape of new features, new functions, new things that you can do with it. And so I think with AI, you would sort of be remiss to just be opposed to it completely. You can't push something away that's going to become a part of life. You're going to be ignorant to the effects of it, and you're going to be ill-prepared for the future. That's going to be dominated by it. So I think that it's a challenge, to incorporate something new because you have to be exposed to all the ways that it's going to be used. You have to stay on top of it because it's constantly changing, constantly developing. But it's the knowledge of, if I'm aware of it, so are my students. And I have to know how they're going to use it so that I can teach them to effectively, use it in the classroom as part of their job someday, and to understand how it works and what are the complications of using it, what are the possible criticisms of using it, the ethical, problems of using it. Because the last thing we want to do is to pretend that something doesn't exist and let people sort of just be exposed to it on their own without that educational sort of questioning of what is it actually doing and what are the consequences of it. So I think it's important that my students are exposed to that we have these conversations about it and we talk about it rather than sort of putting the covers over your head and pretending that it doesn't exist, because it doesn't make it go away. It's still there.
All right, I believe that's all the questions. So thank you for letting me interview you. Yeah. And there we have it. That was our interview with Mr. City. We learned about his opinions on artificial intelligence, why he moved to Cape Cod, and how he helps students get through their troubles.